Hello everyone, my name is JJ, and today we are going to talk about the dumbest thing in the entire world. It is called the Mandela effect. A lot of people on the internet are really obsessed with this thing. You can find tons and tons of YouTube videos about it.
So everyone's talking about the situation called the Mandela effect.
What is the Mandela effect?
10 freakiest examples of the Mandela effect.
Mandela effect.
Mandela effect.
Mandela effect.
Mandela effect.
It even has its own subreddit. So what is it and why is it so stupid? Basically, the entire premise of the Mandela effect is that people sometimes have bad memories. That is literally all there is to it. Sometimes we have very vivid memories of things that we think happened but actually didn't. This phenomenon has been extensively studied by psychologists and psychiatrists and criminologists and journalists and historians. But the Mandela effect is not interested in any of that. No, what the Mandela effect does is it takes this very ordinary, very common human tendency and weaves it into this whole elaborate conspiracy theory. The name comes from Nelson Mandela. He was a famous black South African freedom fighter who was imprisoned from the mid-1960s to the early 1990s for opposing the racist government of his country. Now, apparently, a lot of people have memories that Nelson Mandela died during this period. I really do not know how anyone could possibly sustain this belief, considering that the release of Nelson Mandela from prison in 1990 was one of the single most acclaimed events of the 20th century, as was Nelson Mandela's subsequent election as president of South Africa, which made him one of the single most famous world leaders of all time. But yeah, so apparently some people managed to miss all that. They missed the coverage of him winning the Nobel Peace Prize, and meeting with Bill Clinton, and meeting with the Queen, and meeting with Oprah, and criticizing the Iraq War, and all the rest of it. They were like, no, I'm fairly sure he died in prison. And then when Nelson Mandela really did die in the year 2013, they were apparently like, mind blown. How to explain it? Well, the correct answer is these people were almost impossibly ignorant of the world around them, but that is not satisfying enough. So instead, the correct answer must surely be
alternate universes may have collided or even merged with our own.
Some people think it might be proof of parallel universes.
Not only are there multiple parallel universes, but they're colliding and crossing in some way.
Collapsing timelines and other parallel dimensions, which is why some people remember the old timeline and some people have the memory of the new timeline. When there is a shift in gravity, it's a possibility that a rift in our time space would open up and you would be able to see into a different time space.
yes, of course, alternate dimensions. That makes so much more sense. People of the so-called Mandela effect community have since used this bizarre logic to explain a vast number of things that they remember being one way, but are in fact actually a different way. Such examples of the Mandela effect usually fall into the following categories. One is subtle differences between the names of things. The famous example is the Berenstain Bears, which is spelled S-T-A-I-N, like the stain on a shirt. Apparently a lot of people remember it being spelled Berenstein, like S-T-E-I-N, like Einstein. Other people remember Sex and the City being called Sex in the City, or Jif peanut butter being called Jiffy. The obvious explanation for why this is that these people just did not take these things very seriously. So with the Berenstain Bears, these were books that were written for children, and as a result, a lot of people probably did not read them themselves, or if they did, they probably didn't pay a lot of attention to the spelling of the author's last name. As an adult, you do often meet people whose last names end with S-T-E-I-N. People whose last names end with Stain is more unusual, so that's why people just assume that Berenstain must have been spelled that way. This is really not very deep stuff. Another supposed example is like very subtle design elements of like logos or cartoon characters. So it's like, did the Kit Kat logo have a hyphen or not? Did the Monopoly guy have a monocle or not? If you give the wrong answer, it must be proof that you're from a different universe or whatever. And again, the obvious explanation for this is that people are just not that observant. For example, I can be like, did Donald Duck have a bow on the front of his shirt or not? And unless you really care about Donald Duck, you probably could not answer that question with gun to your head certainty. Your brain has probably elected to not store information that trivial. Because let us be clear, the supposed manifestations of the Mandela effect are always about incredibly trivial things. Everyone is always like, in my timeline, the Coca-Cola logo was slightly more askew. No one is ever like, in my timeline, Coca-Cola came in blue cans and was made of apple juice. Another commonly cited supposed Mandela effect thing is famous movie quotes not actually being from movies. So, Luke, I am your father, is not actually said in Star Wars. Instead, the scene goes like,
He told me you killed him. No, I am your father.
or Hannibal Lecter doesn't actually say, hello Clarice, in Silence of the Lambs. There's lots of other examples. Now, this is an example of what more serious people just call a misquote, which is a famous or memorable saying attributed to a person that they didn't actually say. So for example, let them eat cake by Marie Antoinette is a very famous misquote. Misquotes can often arise from cleaning up or editing an actual quote into something a bit more punchy and memorable, or sometimes they're just completely made up lines that nevertheless sound like something that person would say. So Luke, I am your father might not be what Darth Vader actually said, but it is a more memorable phrase than no, I am your father, and it sounds better when taken out of context. And saying hello Clarice in this sort of creepy voice is the kind of thing Hannibal Lecter would say, which is why we like to say it. Lastly, the fourth kind of so-called Mandela effects are just plain old ignorance. There's no deep explanation for these ones, it's just people being obviously dumb or wrong about something. A lot of the Mandela people insist that in their universe there was a movie called Shazam starring Sinbad. They are obviously just misremembering the movie Kazam starring Shaq, but perhaps they just don't want to admit that they got two black guys confused. There's this one channel on YouTube that does a lot of Mandela effect videos, and it has just descended into the two guys talking about things that they've never heard of, like say Victoria Falls.
I'm always looking at like the most beautiful waterfalls in the world because, you know, I'm being a photographer, I'm just so fascinated by this thing. And when I came across this just a few days ago, because I was researching some of this stuff, it was like I was seeing something out of a dream. I'm like, why didn't I ever hear of this thing before? It's so beautiful, and I have like no memory of it.
Victoria Falls is one of the most famous waterfalls in the entire world. If you don't know it exists, that's kind of on you. And here we get to the core of the whole problem. Any self-help person will tell you that one of the most important qualities you can develop as a human is a sense of humility. Humility is the ability to admit that you have the capacity to be wrong, or make mistakes, or screw things up, or just generally be bad at stuff from time to time. A well-developed sense of humility will not only make you more attractive to other people, it is also key to your own personal growth and self-improvement. Think about a person that you really respect. Chances are he or she is probably very charismatic, but they probably also have a certain quiet dignity. And that kind of quiet dignity comes from realizing the limits of your own capacities and understanding that you do not have to be right about everything all the time. The Mandela effect, by contrast, is basically the antidote to humility. It's a theory that provides an excuse for never having to admit to the flawed nature of your own memory, and thus your own personal unreliability. It says, oh no, you could not possibly be wrong about even the most trivially unimportant fact. It must be the very fabric of time and space conspiring against you. When you look at the folks who are really hardcore into the Mandela effect stuff, they really come off as some of the most insufferably self-centered people on Earth. Once you buy into this idea that your ability to be wrong is actually the universe's fault, there is no limit to the crazy places this can take you. So for example, on the Mandela Effect Reddit, you see people who seriously argue that every word they do not know how to spell or pronounce correctly is actually a Mandela effect. Well, in my universe, it used to be spelled dreamt. In mine, Pharaoh was spelled Pharaoh. Hillary Clinton's name used to have one L, but now it suddenly has two. In my universe, it's pronounced Yosemite. Plus tons and tons of just unapologetic ignorance. America didn't used to be the third biggest country on Earth. All the countries in Africa are moving around. Iceland looks too weird where it is. Is water wetter than it used to be? This does not seem very healthy to me. Like, a lot of these people are clearly quite young, and yet they are getting very into this idea that they themselves are the sole arbiter of matters of quite objective fact. Instead of learning humility and trying to self-improve by maybe getting better at spelling or geography, they are just doubling down on this conspiracy theory where they always get to be right. I take it back. There are alternate universes after all. The one where mature adults live, and this one. Pick yours carefully.
Mama, Papa, sister, and me. Snug as bugs